The Iliad, Book 3, A Duel and a Trojan View of the Greeks. Good morning, girls. Today we are going to start the actual text of Homer's epic poem, The Iliad, and we have to deal with chapter 3. The name of book 3 in Homer's Iliad is A Duel and a Trojan View of the Greeks. Now, I think by now you are familiar with the word duel, what exactly a duel means. A duel is basically a fight between two people till one of them dies and the other person comes up as the winner. That is what a duel is. And in this particular chapter, if you see, it is divided into 4 parts. Line number 1 to 120 talks about how both the armies, the Greek forces and the Trojan forces, they advance to battle. And the main event of this section is the proposal that is made by Paris of a duel with Menelaus to end the war. We know that the reason behind the Trojan War was because Paris had actually wronged Menelaus by abducting his wife Helen, and he had brought her back to Troy, and Menelaus had gone to the shores of Troy in order to rescue or take revenge from Paris. Hector is the elder brother of Paris. He announces the plan, and both sides agree. What is the plan? Plan regarding the duel. They talk about how they should settle it between themselves, and the person who is going to emerge as the winner was the person who was going to take Helen back along with all the things that came with her. Now, line numbers 121 to 244 discusses or deals with how goddess Iris, who is a messenger goddess, tells Helen in Ilium of the impending duel. She informs Helen what is going to happen. She comes to the walls of Ilium. Ilium is the same as Troy, and describes some Greek heroes to Priam. So, in this section, Helen goes to a tower where the king of Troy and his ministers were there, or his counselors were there, and from that high tower she points out all the major Greek warriors who were there from Menelaus' side. Line number 245 to 380, we see that oaths are taken and the duel begins. There is a sacrifice which is made in order to please the gods, and both parties take oath that they are going to abide by the rules of the duel. Menelaus is cheated of victory by Aphrodite, who rescues Paris. Aphrodite intervenes in the duel that was being fought by two mortal men, and she tries to save Paris, which breaks the oath. In the last part, that is line number 380 to 461, we see how Aphrodite forces a reluctant Helen to go to Paris and make love to him, and Agamemnon declares Menelaus as the winner of the duel. So the Greek side say that since Paris is nowhere to be found, Menelaus becomes the winner. But the Trojan side does not agree because Paris was still alive. It was only because of Aphrodite that he had been rescued from the clutches of Menelaus and saved from being killed in the duel. So let's begin. Book 3, line number onwards reads: When everyone had been drawn up, each contingent under its leader, the Trojans advanced with shrieks and cries like cranes, which, screaming from the skies, fly from the onset of winter and its unnatural downpours. Shrieking, they make for the rivers of ocean to bring death and destruction to the pygmies, launching their wicked assault from the air. But the Greeks move forward in silence, breathing courage, filled with determination to stand by one another. Now, before we go to the explanation part of this, I would like you to tell you a story in the Greek mythology regarding two creatures. One is called as the pygmy, which you find mentioned over here also, Pygmies. It is plural for pygmy, Pygmy. Now, the other creature mentioned over here is crane, Crane, which is a kind of a bird. Now, according to the Greek mythology, the pygmies and the cranes, they were sworn enemies. or they were arch nemesis. Okay, nemesis means the most prime enemy that a person can have, right? So these pygmies, what they used to do was that these pygmies used to attack and take away the eggs of cranes, and the cranes used to retaliate by attacking the pygmies in order to save their eggs from being hunted by these pygmies. So we just need to understand over here was that the pygmies and the cranes were sworn enemies, and whenever their fight used to take place, the cranes used to attack these pygmies with lots of cries and shrieks. And this is the way that the Trojan army appeared to be moving towards the Greek forces or the Achaean forces. See what Homer writes. When everyone had been drawn up, each contingent is that group or rank of army, under its leader, the Trojans advanced with shrieks and cries like cranes, with screaming from the skies fly from the onset of winter in order to attack the pygmies. So the Trojans were moving or going in the direction of the Greeks with shrieks which were similar to the shrieks of the crane who used to attack the pygmies, launching their wicked assault. But the Greeks moved forward in silence, breathing courage, filled with determination to stand by one another. If you observe the Greek forces, they were in complete contrast to the Trojan ones. On one side, the Trojans were moving towards them in a shrieking fashion, whereas the Greek forces were completely silent. They were moving in a very disciplined force, okay, towards the Trojans. Line number 10 onwards reads, as the south wind wraps a mist around the mountain tops, bad news for the shepherd, but better than night for the thief. And a man can see no farther than he can throw a stone. So dense a cloud of dust arose from their marching feet as they advanced at speed across the plain. This is the movement of the Greek forces which is being described by Homer. Homer says, and he gives an example, a very pictorial description of the way in which the Greek forces were moving. And he compares it with the scene of a mountaintop being covered with mist. When there is a lot of fog and mist in a mountaintop, it is very difficult to see what is present. Now, a shepherd who is present on the top of that mountain in that misty environment, it's very difficult for him to, save his sheeps from thieves. But for a thief, it is a very ideal situation because that fog or mist is going to help him to steal from the shepherd, or that mist is going to hide him. That mist or fog can be so dense that a man can see no farther than he can throw a stone. Now, please understand why Homer has written this. Homer has actually written this in order to describe the way in which the Greek forces were moving. When they were moving in a very disciplined fashion, one after the other, their marching feet produced a dust that almost appeared like this kind of fog or mist on a mountain, in which one can not see beyond a stone's throw. The next paragraph reads, when the armies had come within range of each other, godlike Paris stepped out from the Trojan ranks. He was decked out with a leopard's skin on his back and a curved bow and a sword. Brandishing two bronze-headed spears, he challenged all the best of Greeks to meet him face to face in mortal combat. So the armies had gathered just beyond the wall of the Trojan city, or the city of Ilium, beside the sea. And when they were face to face, both sides were in front of each other. Paris steps out from his ranks, from his contingent, or from his army. He steps out. Now, Paris was a person who was known for his looks, He was not a warrior like Menelaus or Agamemnon or Achilles. He appeared to be decorated, with a leopard skin on his back and a curved bow and a sword. These are the two weapons he was carrying. Besides two bronze headed spears, he challenged all the best of Greeks to meet him face to face in the mortal combat. So he tries to appear very brave and very courageous, and he goes out and he challenges all these Greek forces that I want to meet Menelaus in a mortal combat. What is a mortal combat? Mortal combat is referring to the same duel that we were discussing. Now, as soon as Menelaus sees Paris walk out from the Trojan side, he becomes excited because that was the person that Menelaus wanted to get hold of. When warlike Menelaus saw Paris striding towards him in front of the enemy ranks, he was as delighted as a lion that comes across a great carcass and finds it is an antlered stag or wild goat. Now, you will have to note how these various characters are being described. A lot of times, Paris is described as godlike. So, whenever you're writing in your answers as well, you can use these godlike Paris for describing Paris or warlike Menelaus. So Menelaus was the person who had been wronged by Paris. This is established. Paris had abducted the wife of Menelaus, even though he was promised the hand of the most beautiful one present on earth by goddess Aphrodite. Nonetheless, it was a kind of insult for Menelaus because Paris had abducted his lawfully wedded wife. So when Menelaus sees Paris brandishing his weapons and opening a challenge, he becomes very happy, and he was delighted. And see the way in which Homer describes, and he compares it with the delight of a lion who comes across a great carcass refers to a dead body. It can be the dead body of a person, it can be the dead body of a generally it's the dead body of an animal. So Homer says that he was as delighted as a lion that comes across a great carcass and finds it to be an antlered stag or a wild goat, a good hunt for the lion. Talking about the lion, Homer writes, he is starving and greedily devours it, eats it, in spite of all the efforts of the quick dogs and young hunters to drive him off. So the lion is so delighted to find that antlered stag or wild goat that he is able to fight so many quick dogs and hunters and devour it himself. So delighted was Menelaus when his eyes fell on godlike Paris. Again, godlike is describing his looks. For he thought his chance had come of paying back the man who had wronged him. How had he wronged him? By abducting his wife. Fully armed, he immediately leapt from his chariot to the ground. So Menelaus is very quick to react. He is known to be a great warrior. Whereas, on the other hand, we have Paris, who is known for his looks and not for his warrior skills. So, Menelaus, in a lot of excitement and delight because he has finally got to the man who had wronged him, he gets down from his chariot. Next, what happens is what is present in line number 30. When godlike Paris saw Menelaus emerging through the front ranks, his heart failed him completely and he retreated into his own contingent of warriors to avoid death. So, all the bravery and all the courage that Paris was trying to show, it all melts down as soon as Paris lays eyes on Menelaus because he knows that Menelaus was hungry for his blood. Now, his heart failed him completely. He lost all his courage, he lost all his bravery. And what he does is, like a coward, note the word, he retreated into his own contingent of warriors. He went back from where he came. He retreated in order to avoid death. And Homer, in the next few lines, describes the way in which Paris's retreat can be compared. He retreated like a man who catches the sight of a snake in a wooded ravine and sharply recoils, knees trembling, and retreats pale faced. So godlike Paris disappeared back into the mass of proud Trojans, terrified of Menelaus, son of Atreus. Now, Homer describes the way in which the cowardice of Paris comes before everybody. And as soon as he sees Menelaus, he retreats back into his own contingent, like a man retreats back when he catches the sight of a snake in a wooded ravine. Ravine is a kind of a canyon, and the way in which a man would recoil from a snake because he knows that the snake is a deadly animal, so, knees trembling. That was the way Paris was behaving. Retreats, pale faced, he had lost his color. So, godlike Paris disappeared back into the mass of proud Trojans, terrified of Menelaus, son of Atreus. So, you can use these words to describe Menelaus. One, Menelaus is called as warlike Menelaus, he's called as son of Atreus. So, note these things down. And this act of Paris actually talks or tells us about his character. He was a person who was not courageous at all. He was a person who was a coward. And as soon as he sees Menelaus, he is afraid of him and he goes back into his ranks. Now, Hector sees him. Who is Hector? Hector is the brother of Paris and son of King of Troy, Priam. And Hector did not agree with what Paris had done. The abduction of Helen that had resulted in this Trojan War, Hector realized that this war can bring an end to their city and to their kingdom. Now, Hector has not approved the act of Paris, and he believed that Paris had actually wronged Menelaus. But since Paris was his brother, that is the reason why he was standing beside him in this Trojan War, and he was supporting him because he was his own blood, his own brother. But that does not stop him from taunting Paris. Hector saw him and attacked him sharply, and he tries to mock him. He says, Paris, you parody, with your wonderful looks, you sex crazed seducer, you should never have been born or married. So Hector knows that Paris is the reason because of which the Greek forces, who were once the allies and friends of Ilium or Troy, are now standing against them in a war. He tells him that you have your looks with you. You behave like a seducer, a man who is controlled more by his desires than his mind. You should have never been born. It's a curse that Paris was born or even married. Married to whom? Married to Helen. How I wish that were the case. So Hector tells him that he wished that Paris would have never been born because of the birth of Paris, the whole city was facing such a trouble. And if you remember that there was a kind of prophecy made in the name of Paris, that Paris would be the Paris will be the cause for the complete annihilation of Ilium or Troy. So Hector tells this to him, that I wish that you were never born. Far better that than to be the disgrace you are now, trusted by nobody. So Paris is in a situation where he is not liked by his own people, even because of the act that he had done. That act, that abduction, had brought the Greek forces to the shores of Troy or Ilium. How the long haired Greeks must cackle when they see us make a champion of a man because of his good looks, not his strength of purpose or courage. Now, the Greeks were known to have long hair, and Hector says that the Greeks must be cackling meaning laughing loudly, because they see that Paris has been made as a champion. Champion refers to the best warrior from a particular side. That best warrior is called as the champion, a representative of that particular side. Now, when Paris had walked out of the Trojan rank and when he had challenged these Greek forces, he had actually taken the position of a champion. So this is what Hector is taunting Paris with. That the Greeks must be laughing at us, cackling, because they see that the Trojans have made a champion of a person because of his looks and not because he has strength of purpose or courage. Because as soon as Menelaus came towards him or in his direction, Paris was the first person to retreat his footsteps back. And that is not a good sign for a warrior because it actually hints at the lack of courage. So Paris is not a courageous person and he is even being taunted by his own brother. They were supporting him, they were standing by him because Paris was the son of Priam, but they did not approve of what Paris had done by abducting Helen from her own home. Hector continues and says, "Can you be the same man who picked a crew referring to a group of men, crossed the waves in your seafaring ships mixed with foreigners, and carried off a beautiful woman from a distant land and from a warrior family too? Helen, this is the woman that Hector is talking about." So Hector summarizes the way in which Paris had abducted Helen. He had gone and he had crossed the sea, gone to Sparta, and he had carried off Helen to be a scourge to your father. Scourge means bane or a curse, a kind of misfortune. So you're nothing less than a bane or a curse to your own father, not just to the father, to the town and to the whole people, to cause our enemies to rejoice, and you to hang your head in shame. And won't you now stand up to warlike Menelaus? So because you had created the problem and created and brought trouble from distant shores of Sparta to the shores of Troy, why are you now hanging your head in shame? These are very caustic questions, very burning questions that Hector asks Paris. Why do you hang your head in shame now? Because this was not the time to retreat. Paris had never thought what the consequences of him abducting Helen would have been. So, when now he was running away from his problem, it was bothering Hector, and he tries to make him understand that he is the person who should be facing the fruit of his action, and that was facing Menelaus. He asks him, "Won't you now stand up to war like Menelaus? Why are you running away? You have to face Menelaus now. Then you would soon find out the kind of man he is." So Hector asks Paris that you need to face your enemy, you need to face the person whom you had enraged, warlike Menelaus, son of Atreus. And when you do that, he will be able to find out who he actually is. Whose luscious wife you stole, very attractive wife you stole. Your lyre would not help you at all. Lyre is a stringed instrument. Paris was a charmer. He had a very charming personality. He could play musical instruments. So your lyre, that musical instrument, is not going to help him in the war or on the battlefield. Nor Aphrodite's gifts. Your lovely locks are hair, and pretty face when you mixed with the dust. So all the qualities or attributes that you have, because of which you were able to maybe seduce, more importantly abduct Helen, all these gifts that Aphrodite had given you, it's not going to help you in the battlefield when you have to face warlike Menelaus. But the Trojans are too soft. Otherwise, you would have been stoned to death long ago for the trouble you have caused. The Trojans were so soft that they did not punish Paris for abducting Helen and bringing troubles to their shore. If they would have had not been soft, he would have had been stoned to death long ago for all the problem that he has caused, all the trouble that he has caused. We'll end this lecture today for the time being, and in the next lecture, we are going to continue from the reply of Paris.